Hi there, welcome back to my channel, Our Gifted Garden. I'm Regina, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how I set up my drip irrigation system all by myself for not very much money. And as you notice, I have my little friend on my shoulder. This is T'Challa. He is my green-cheeked conure. We got him just a few months ago, and he likes hanging out, so I figured I'd let you guys meet him as well. He is a sweet baby. He's a baby. He's only about 5-6 months old, and yeah, so he'll be here probably. If he decides to stay here, he might leave. We'll see. All right, so he likes my hair. I need to chill. All right, so drip irrigation. If you live in a really warm climate like I do, I'm in North Texas, Zone 8A. I'm just outside of Dallas. So if you live in a really warm climate like that, then watering your garden, especially if it's of any size, if you've got a garden that's pretty big, can take a lot of time. I know for me, I would spend about an hour every other day watering my entire garden, and every day I would need to hit the containers once we got into summer and we're having that heat in the high 90s or 100s, just to keep things like alive. So I've been gardening for several years, and one of the things I've been wanting to do is get some type of irrigation, at least in part of the garden, so that I'm not having to spend all that time. And also so that when I go out of town, I don't have to have someone come water for me, because that can be difficult as well. So I want to show you guys how I did it. I set mine up with products that I just purchased on Amazon, and I'm still in the process of doing it, but I have a few of my beds finished and working, and so I know I'll be able to finish the rest of it. But since it's kind of early in the season, I wanted to go ahead and give you guys some insight into what I'm doing in case you want to do the same for yourself for this season, or, you know, do it later. So first off, for drip irrigation, I want to show you guys just everything that I'm using and to give you an overview of what it looks like. I may insert that little piece here so you can kind of see how it works. But yeah, so this is what you need to set up drip irrigation. The first thing you're going to need is a splitter for your water hose. I have just one faucet in my backyard, and so that faucet kind of has to be able to do everything. So the first thing that I needed was a splitter. Fortunately, I already had one of those just because we use something for the hose and sometimes for a sprinkler. So I already had a splitter. If you don't have one, you probably want to get a splitter so that with your drip irrigation set up, you'll still be able to have a water hose attached as well, and you're not having to undo and redo things, because that can get old really quickly. So the first thing I needed was a hose splitter. And then the second thing I needed was an adapter piece. And this helps me adapt my distribution hose. That is the hose that distributes the water throughout the garden, the main hose. I needed an adapter to adapt that to my faucet, because as it came, it didn't quite fit. But so I purchased an adapter piece for my distribution hose to my faucet. So the next thing that I needed for my drip irrigation system was a distribution hose. I'm using a 1/2 inch distribution hose. Now this is the hose. This isn't the one where the water actually comes out of. This is the main one where the water that distributes the water throughout. So I have part of that hose attached to every bed in my garden. So that's my distribution hose. It'll make sense, like, so you can kind of see that's my distribution hose. And then the other thing I needed are emitter hoses. Now these are the hoses where the water will actually drip out of these hoses. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. Some people buy a hose made for emitting, or they use another distribution hose, and then they buy little emitter pieces to attach to that hose, and those cause the water to drip out. I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be a little bit easier, and so I bought an emitter hose that already has the emitters built into the hose at a certain interval. The one I am using, it has the emitters at every 12 inches. So every foot there is an emitter where water comes out of the hose. So you can buy a hose that already has the emitters in it so that you don't have to go in and put the emitters. Now the benefit, I guess, of being able to put them in yourself would be that you can place the emitters exactly where your plants are. And this might be useful for when you're adding drip irrigation to a landscape where the plants are perennials and they're gonna be in that same spot each year. But in my garden where I have mostly annuals, it doesn't really make sense for me because, I mean, yes, I could still do it and put the emitters where my plants are, but next year, my plants probably aren't going to be in that exact same place, depending on what I put in that bed. So it didn't really benefit me all that much. Now, when I replant, I'll be able to, like for next season, I'll put the plants, of course, as best as I can where the emitters are, and then I can kind of finagle the hose around to make sure every plant is able to get water. So there's workarounds, but to me, it just made more sense, and it was a lot easier to buy a hose that already had the emitter in it. So my emitter hose is 1/4 inch. And then the other things that I need, and I'll show you this. Here, let me show you the emitter hose, and I'll insert footage of the distribution hose so you'll be able to see it all. Don't worry. So my emitter hose, I bought this. It looks a mess because the hose is all coming out because I'm using it. But it actually came in a box like this, and I don't know if you can see inside of here, but it's like wrapped around so I can just pull it out. Starting at the end. It's kind of tangly because I'm still working with it. But here's the emitter hose. It's 1/4 inch. And then the emitters are every 12 inches. So maybe you can see that, but you see that little hole in the hose. I don't know if it's going to focus or not. Let me look away. But that's where the emitters are, and they're already in there every 12 inches on this hose. So sorry if that's blurry, but I'll insert a picture that's close up if it looks blurry in my footage. And so I got this one that's 500 feet because that just made the most sense financially and because of the size of my garden. Of course, depending on the size of your garden, you may not need quite as much. I mean, there's plenty in here. Now, I'm not done yet, but I'm definitely going to have some left over, which I'm fine with because next year I may need to add a few more, or I may need to add more this season as I'm going through the season and seeing if the plants are getting enough water. So we'll see how it goes. But here's my emitter hose. The distribution hose is already out in the garden, but I'll show you what that looks like. And then the other things I needed were little connector pieces. So I have these 1/2 inch connector pieces, lots of different ones. There's like end pieces, like this. There are T connectors. It came all in one little kit of connector pieces so that I'm able to cut my distribution hose as I need to place it where it needs to go, all still coming from one source. And then I also have connector pieces for my 1/4 inch emitter hose. And these came in a little box like this. Now this is a lot of different connector pieces. A lot of them I probably won't end up using this season. The ones I'm using the most are these end pieces here, and these close up the end of the emitter hose. And these little barbed connector pieces, because this is what I use to connect my emitter hose to my distribution hose where I need it. And then I also needed to cut the emitter hose, because notice it's one long hose, to cut it, and the distribution hose. I just use my pruners, a pair of sharp pruners, because the hoses are plastic, so they cut rather easily with something just sharp enough. So these little pruners work perfectly for cutting the hose to size, and so I just kind of measure it out to the length I need for a bed and cut it there. And then I also use, where's my little tool? T'Challa loves to bury himself in my hair, which is cute, but it gets annoying when I try to get him out. Look at him. So I also have this little tool. This is something I did purchase specifically for this process. And this tool is a little hole punch thing. And it's made specifically to punch the hole into the distribution hose. So when I have that little barbed piece that connects my emitter hose to my distribution hose, but I have to put a hole in it in order to push that barbed piece through. So this little thing makes the perfect size hole that I need to connect it perfectly. So it was, I did it one bed of them using like a little Phillips screwdriver and poking holes in it, but it was really hard. It took me a long time, whereas this, it's just so easy and it punches the hole to the perfect size. So it was worth getting it. It wasn't very expensive. I think it was under $10. I will link every single piece because I purchased them all on Amazon. Every single piece in the video description. I'll put links to all of the products that I use in my irrigation system. All right, and so the last thing are landscape staples. And these are just for holding the hoses in place, the distribution hose as well as the emitter hoses. Once I have them where I want, I just use these landscape staples to hold them in place. And that's great because if I need to move them or modify them, like for next season, it'll be really easy to move things around because these lift up and you reuse them. But these are steel, super strong landscape staples that I was using to put down weed block fabric throughout my garden. So I already had some of these on hand. And you'll need probably quite a few of them depending on how big your garden is. But yeah, I'll put a link to these as well. So with all of these pieces, I have been able to set up my drip irrigation system. Now, how do I put it together, right? So the way I learned how to set it up, I kind of figured it out based on seeing a setup, like a drawing that someone else did. I was just doing some research on drip irrigation. I knew I didn't want to pay for like a full system. One, because I wanted to tailor it to my garden and I didn't want to pay what it would cost to have someone tailor it to my garden. And so I decided I was going to do it myself, but I looked on a few websites that actually sell irrigation systems, and some of them have like plans and stuff and how they set them up. And so I looked at one of those and I saw a plan for how someone kind of set up with the distribution hoses and the emitter hoses, and it had kind of some instructions. And so I kind of used that as a guide and to figure out how to set it up for myself. And it has worked, so I'm excited about that. But the first thing that you want to do is get your distribution hose, and you want to set that up so that you have a piece of the hose. You want to get your distribution hose and hook that to the faucet and everything, and then set it up, guide it throughout your garden so that you have a piece of that hose for every bed or every area of your garden, so that you would be able to attach an emitter hose to that and reach every part of your garden. So since I have raised beds, the way I have mine set up is I have the distribution hose just kind of at the top of each of the beds, going the width of the bed. So then I can hook in emitter hoses, and I have a way to do that for every bed. And then once you've done that, I use landscape staples and stuff like that to hold it in place. Now you don't want to push the landscape staples all the way down to smush the hose, but you want them just in place to hold it where it needs to be. And then the next step would be to attach your emitter hoses to that distribution hose. Now, the first thing, before you attach them, you need to attach a connector piece so that will connect that emitter hose to the distribution hose. And the way that I do that is you have to take something to warm up the plastic, because it's not malleable enough to fit those connector pieces, because you want them to fit really snug. So I just use my blow dryer, and I have footage of that right here. I use my blow dryer to kind of warm up the plastic just a bit, and then I was able to easily attach the connector piece to my emitter hose. And then I did the same on the other end, warmed it up with my blow dryer, and then attached the end piece. So then, once I knew what length I needed for a bed, then I could just do all of those. And I just did that sitting in the house, attached a lot of those for the ones I was going to do the next day. I can do them all at once, right? Get all of those pieces ready to go. Once I have those attached, then I just go out into the garden, and then with the distribution hose, and then I go to the distribution hose, look and see where exactly I want to put attach the emitter hose, and I use this to punch the hole. Use my handy tool to punch the hole, and then once the hole is punched, I can easily push that connector piece into the hole, and because it's barbed, it pushes in, but it won't pull out easily. And there it is. So now once that's connected, I just place the emitter hose exactly where I want it using the landscape staples to hold it in place, making sure each plant has at least one emitter really close by the ground, by the root system, and then I'm done. And so I just keep doing that, attaching the emitters throughout the garden until all of my drip irrigation is set up. So once you have all of your emitters in place, all of your emitter hoses in all of your beds, then what you want to do is, wait until you need to water and water your garden using the irrigation. It might take a few days to kind of get this right, but it's hard to know exactly how much water or how long you need to have the drip irrigation on to water your garden. So you probably want to do it manually at first and just turn it on maybe for 30 minutes or turn it on for an hour, depending on the size of your garden. Because you got to remember, if you have a really big garden, there's only so much water pressure that's coming out. So the larger your garden, the longer you'll probably have to have the water running, right, to get enough water to each of the plants. So you want to kind of test it out, figure out about what amount of time is the right amount of time to get your garden thoroughly watered. And then once you're done with that, you can actually add a timer to it so that it'll do it automatically daily or every other day. I purchased a timer. I have not used it yet. Let me grab it. Now, there are timers that have splitters where you can have multiple zones. Mine is just one zone because I just have it set up in one spot. I have everything coming from one distribution hose, and everything needs about the same amount of water. So that's how I have it set up. But I have not attached this yet because I have to finish adding all of my emitter hoses, getting everything set up, and then do kind of trialing it to see about how much water I need. Once I do that, then I'm going to add the timer and set this up so that my watering of the garden will happen automatically. I won't even have to go out there and turn it on, which will be really, really nice, especially for when I go out of town, planning to be out for about a week and a half in June. And so that'll be when this really comes in handy. But yeah, so once you've done that, then you have drip irrigation. You don't have to do as much hand watering and you're set. Now for containers, you can kind of treat the containers just as if they were a raised bed or any other part of your garden. You can see where your distribution hose is, make sure your distribution hose goes near them, and then add some emitters, wrap them, in the base of the plant for each of your potted, for each of your containers, or you can use an emitter hose to kind of go across multiple containers, just depending on how you have them placed. But you can do the exact same thing so that you have the drip irrigation in your containers as well. So that's it. That's how I'm setting up irrigation. Now, drip irrigation, remember, it's great because it saves you time, but it also helps to conserve water because you're getting the water exactly to where it needs to be. And it's helping to keep you from overwatering and watering in such a way where you have a lot of the water dripping out and either eroding your yard or just dripping into places that you don't need it. So it's also a great way to conserve water. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope you found this content helpful. And if so, then of course, go ahead and like this video. And if you're interested in more gardening content, then subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. And of course, share it with your gardening friends so that they can benefit from this information as well. Until we meet again, have a great one. Bye.